we had this gentleman on before. We talked about Obama phones. Remember?
Yeah. Luke is a numbers guy.
Luke, and I like it. He's a numbers guy, but he sounds like he's one of us, kind of. He's a senior watchdog reporter, data editor for the Washington Examiner. Welcome to the show, Luke. How you doing?
I'm good.
Good. What's a data editor? Tell that to our listeners. What does that mean, a data editor?
The federal government spends money on so much stuff. You need a massive computer database just to wrap your head around.
Is that you?
So that's me.
So, what is the worst thing? What do they waste most on? What's the most egregious thing you've ever seen?
This housing project issue is really one of the worst because it's a case where the federal government funds a program but allows local governments to administer how those funds are spent. So it's like if I gave you my credit card and I said, I'm not going to check the statement, you're going to be way more inclined to go out to eat for a nice meal on that as opposed to spending your own money. Because people don't necessarily know that housing projects are run by local governments like the Chicago Housing Authority, but they're funded but they're funded by the federal government. And the federal government just dumps this money at Chicago and says, use it however you want. And so the local guys don't have any incentive to make sure that it's well spent because they can just go back to the feds for more money.
And they don't want to show that they're not spending it all or their funding will be cut.
Right. And it's, for a lot of these people, it's a jobs program. And basically, the more people they can say are poor and give houses to, these are just people that are conduits to federal funds to them. That's it.
Well, we have an article right here that says public housing officials won't verify whether residents are truly needy. So you don't even know sometimes who's getting what. If I hate to say, if you're a person of, I don't mean it's negative, but let's be honest. I mean, I walk in there and say, hey, I need housing, and someone of a different persuasion, so to speak, walks in there.
Yeah, but you do it in Charleston, West Virginia, you're going to get it.
Who the hell wants to live there?
The people from Charleston.
No, I want to live in Tupelo, Mississippi, man. That's where I want to be.
I've been to Tupelo.
It's nice.
Birthplace of Elvis. No, it's not nice. It's not that great.
It's very nice. Very.
Okay.
It's very nice.
Okay.
So, Luke, let me ask you, and I don't mean, I'm not being a wise ass. It says a senior watchdog. So what can you do? I mean, you just report, because nothing seems to gets done. It's just, you might have all this data and analyze it, but nothing gets, do they do anything with it? Or are they just...
That's the thing here is that, HUD is made aware of fraud, and it says, well, that's not our problem. It's the state's responsibility to enforcement. And you go to the states, the local governments rather, and they say, well, HUD, this is HUD. I mean, you got to talk to the federal government. And it's total pass the buck game where literally both parties firmly believe that it's not their responsibility to do even a modicum of checks to verify that people are actually poor, that they're actually not, they don't have under-the-table income from crimes. They do not even check. So when President Obama took office, he appointed a woman named Sandra Henriquez to be, a top HUD person.
Okay.
And she said, it's my priority that we got to run this as a real estate program rather than focusing on tenants. In other words, who cares who's in these housing projects or whether they really need them? We just need to build more houses. And
Great.
She hired a woman named Deborah Gross to be her top deputy. And
Yeah.
Deborah Gross was a lobbyist for the Chicago Housing Authority and other major, big cities housing, authorities. And they came to HUD, and HUD hired a current lobbyist to regulate the very industry that she was overseeing. And when I say current, I mean they let her continue to work as a lobbyist, even as her job was regulating these guys.
What?
They paid her $200,000, and they let her wear two hats. She could also work part-time for her advocating for the cities. Well, with her other hat on, she was giving out the money to the cities.
Luke Rosiak at lukerosiak.com on Twitter, Washington Examiner watchdog. How much fraud is that, though? Do we know how much is being wasted by people who can actually afford to rent their own place or to buy a home, but they're getting help?
Well, I spent a long time going around housing projects around here in D.C. and Virginia, and 90% of the housing project units here have satellite TV. So here they are saying, look, I can't pay my rent, so you got to pay for it. And then meanwhile, well, I do happen to have enough money to buy luxuries for myself. And there are also numerous luxury cars parked, and they have private parking lots, even though, they're right next to subway stations and stuff. Prime land, most people don't have cars, or if they do, they pay for, parking garage.
And
you got potential car payment, insurance, cable TV, bam, $500-600 right there.
Right. And so, I took pictures of all these cars and all the satellite dishes. And like you said, my Twitter feed is at Luke Rosiak, Lukerosiak. Click on a link. You can see all these pictures for yourself because people don't spend a lot of time. For example, someone like Nancy Pelosi, she's not spending time, in housing projects. People just don't know. The elite policymakers have no idea what it's like in these housing projects. And HUD is very much captive to the residents and their advocates. It doesn't view itself as enforcing rules. It views itself as expanding the number of people in housing projects and building more of them. And all this came out in a damning Inspector General report that found that HUD officials had violated numerous rules. They had committed crimes in order to hide a conflict of interest that was from appointing this lobbyist. And so she was a lobbyist for housing authorities, and she got billions of dollars for those authorities. And the Inspector General called her out on it. HUD still remains unrepentant. They insist that it wasn't a conflict of interest. Get this, because they say, well, she didn't personally receive all those billions of dollars. It was just her lobbying clients.
Is this not illegal? How is this legal that she is a lobbyist and administers this program?
Well, the IG report says pretty clearly that it was a crime, that she didn't file conflict of interest reports disclosing this, and they didn't she didn't go to required ethics training. They went to all kinds of steps to hide this from public view. And over a dozen people at HUD didn't file these required forms that illuminate conflicts of interest. And that's a crime each time they didn't do that.
Luke, I'm sorry, Geoff.
Go ahead.
Luke, you work for a major Washington paper. A lot of people, tens of thousands, if not more, are going to read your report. Who in that town is going to do something about it? Somebody has to.
Nobody.
This is crazy.
Luke, was it ever run right? Before this administration, was it ever run right?
Day one, day two.
It's gotten worse. I mean, openly, the Obama administration's priorities for public housing were openly to stop checking whether you were poor. So they had a system called electronic income verification, which is you file a form that says, look, I only make $15,000 a year, so I want a free house. And what they would do is check your tax forms, and if you listed an employer, they would call that employer up and have them confirm your salary. Even though that cost almost no money, they made it a priority to stop doing that. That was a priority for the Obama administration. Don't check anymore. Just take people's words at it.
Anybody could walk in and get a house?
Yep. I mean, but the thing is, there's a limited supply of houses. There's a long waiting list of people who want to get in, but HUD is protecting the people that have been in there for generations sometimes. And they're not oftentimes poor at all, but it's just it's basically just protecting the incumbents, even if they're not poor.
So the ones that really possibly need it can't get it because the incumbents are in because nobody has any checks and balances.
So,
yes.
So the ones, I did a lot in Alexandria, Virginia, taking all these pictures that I have online. And, one of them, it says, they have these stats, and they're all self-provided and not verified in any way. And it says that according to their own admissions, the average income is $29,000 there. So that doesn't sound like necessarily that much, but keep in mind, none of these people are paying for rent, food, or utilities. So I know that I personally don't have $30,000 at the end after I've paid for all my expenses. That's $30,000 in walking around money to spend on whatever you want, things like satellite TV and luxury cars.
Guys, I hate to remind you, but do we remember how we had the Great Recession? It was not verifying income to see if people could afford their homes or not.
No, that's right.
Now we're doing it publicly. And then I always hear, the thing that amazes me, Luke, is I always hear how an indicator of the economy is new construction. And which always blows me away because not every house is lived in right now. So anyway, that's a different story altogether. So are we going to see the federal government buy more housing or construct more housing?
Again, I think it's more of a jobs program for the administrators at the city level, people like the the Chicago Housing Authority. If they think that they can personally profit off of it, then yes, they will build more housing projects. But the other two priorities of this woman who came in under Obama were don't verify whether they did community service, because most people don't have to do community service, but a few of them are supposed to do a few hours of community service in exchange for living there. You used to have to verify with the nonprofit that you volunteered with. The Obama administration said, don't check anymore, just take them at their word. And then the last thing that they did is they found that these housing authorities were diverting $80 million a year to fees. And they were using that for what the housing authorities termed profit. That was the word used in the official investigation. They were profiting off this money, and they were using it to pay high salaries. So the Obama administration also altered the rules to make it so that housing authority officials could pay themselves $200,000 a year each. This woman who worked at HUD, she refused to take the job when they offered her $180,000. She said, "I will only help poor people if you pay me $200,000 a year."
What a sweet gig it is working for the federal government,
isn't it? You do nothing and get paid.
Hey, Luke, you look at the numbers now. What have you seen? Is it true that you can make more dough working for the government now than in private enterprise in general?
I think that low-level workers at the government absolutely make more than low-level private sector workers. I mean, they try to skew it by saying, well, there's scientists and like super smart people who make less than the federal side because there's caps. But the vast majority of people, certainly, you have to look at what is the company that would hire some of these people? What's your alternative? Show me, take some of these government bureaucrats. Show me one company that would hire you at a higher salary than you could be making right now.
They can't. Where did he go?
It's a good place to stop. That felt like closure. Didn't it feel like closure to you, Geoff and Luke? Luke Rosiak, Washington Examiner,
Thanks,
at Luke Rosiak. Thanks. Good work, man.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, buddy.